And I was bawling in that lobby because I knew that I screwed something up. And what I needed in that moment was compassion, not shaming. Hey guys, I have another IVF video for you today, and this one's gonna cover our second round. So super brief backstory, we're doing IVF to avoid the muscular dystrophy gene, which we found out that I'm a carrier of during my first pregnancy. And we have insurance that covers IVF. And so since I am young and healthy, we are opting to do 2 back-to-back rounds of IVF to bank some embryos and hopefully avoid having to do any sort of egg retrievals in the future. We are hoping to just do embryo transfers whenever we want to have more kids. I've got a whole IVF playlist on my channel here. My first IVF video walks through what the whole process is like in a lot of depth and what to expect. So I'm not gonna do that here. I suggest if you want that, click over to that video. I'll link it up in the top right corner and also in the description box down below. But today I wanted to talk about what was different about the first round versus the second round and some mishaps that happened despite me having gone through IVF originally just a few months before. I wanted to first touch on why we're even really doing a second round of IVF. Our doctor recommended that we have 2 to 3 healthy, usable embryos per live birth that we want to have. My husband and I would ideally like to have 2 more kids, and so that puts us in the 4 to 6 embryo range being like the ideal for us to avoid ever having to do another egg retrieval. Our first round of IVF took place in late February to early March and yielded 3 usable embryos, all of which were boys, which is really cool. With the muscular dystrophy gene, we had basically resigned ourselves to potentially only having girls if we couldn't avoid that gene, so having any male embryos was really exciting for us. So the fact that we have 3 is great. Do you hear? I don't know if you can hear the yowling. They're next level today. I'm gonna put some cat bloopers at the end. Feel free to go there. If you just hate this video and you just want cats, I'll throw it at the end for you. Just skip ahead. So this time around was interesting. I actually found that the scheduling for the start of the process was more confusing the second time around than it was the first time. I don't know if it's because I had a death in the family in the middle of the first one and if I just kind of blacked out and didn't remember all of what happened, but when you're starting out your IVF round, you have an appointment that happens apparently before your baseline appointment, and I didn't recall this. And your baseline appointment is where they tell you when to actually start the injections. And then from there on, you do other monitoring appointments throughout the whole process that get closer and closer together until you do an egg retrieval. So the first time around, I got an actual calendar that had my medication amounts on it. And the second time, when they started scheduling my first appointment, which I thought was my baseline appointment, but apparently was not, they sent me like a calendar, but it didn't have the actual dates filled in. It just had the medication amounts, and they were like,
make sure you have your medications ordered before your baseline appointment.
And so the only appointment I had on the calendar was this first one that they scheduled, but it was for like 2 days from then. And so I was like, well, crap, I have to go ahead and get these overnighted to me from the pharmacy. And luckily I knew that process because, again, I had gone through it before, so I got everything ordered and overnighted to me. But it was really stressful, and then come to find out it wasn't even my baseline appointment. So none of that stress was necessary. So then I got an updated calendar shortly after with the dates. But again, I was like, why would you send me the calendar and tell me that I had to have my meds ordered, but not make it clear? It was all very confusing. I ended up having the meds 2 weeks early, just sitting in my fridge, which, it's fine. They were on hand, but it just meant that I had a lot less fridge space than normal because there's a lot of boxes. So another difference between the first round and the second round is the first round, my husband was around to do every single one of my injections, which was awesome. The second round, he was traveling a lot, and so I had to do them all myself. Now, realistically, this is not a problem. It is intimidating the first time or 2 that you do it, but it's really not that bad. In some cases, I think it's actually easier. But I found that when I did them myself, there was something about being able to control the pace that the medicine is going in that I actually found to be a little bit more calming, even though it hurt. So I actually liked doing them a little bit better in that sense, even though I liked the camaraderie of us, working together on it. Now I will say, this is one of those things that you should just know yourself and know maybe your role in the relationship. I am not a very good instruction follower. My husband is, at least for things that require very like tight control. If you just need something to like end up hung up on the wall and there's like not clear instructions, I'm your girl. Like I'll figure it out. But if it's like IKEA furniture, you don't want me assembling it. I do it wrong because I don't read through the whole instructions. I am just like, this seems fine. I'll just go with this. And it always ends up wrong. And so he was definitely concerned with me following through all the instructions properly on whether or not, I would do the injections right. And to be fair, I had my moments where I was like, am I doing this right? There was definitely a time where I used like a needle instead of a Q-cap. If you've done these injections, you'll know what I mean, but you can do the shot preparation either way. But I just like instinctively did it from like a different shot that we had done, and it still mixed fine. It all worked. Like the nurses that were doing my monitoring were like, tell your husband you're doing a great job. Like clearly everything's growing fine. But I just was always worried that I was going to screw something up. And I knew that if he was there, it would have been like meticulously done perfectly. So I don't know. It's very doable on your own, but I think there is a certain element of stress taken away when you know that you can rely on the other person in the relationship for the things that you are weaker at. So during one of my appointments, I was chatting with one of the nurses at my clinic, and she mentioned that she had actually been through IVF herself, and I asked her a little bit, how it went and all this stuff. She mentioned that she had just finished up like her 10 weeks of progesterone shots. And I was like, there's 10 weeks of progesterone shots? Like no one told me that was part of this. I had remembered that a friend who also did IVF mentioned that she was grateful when she hit the point where she didn't need to do them anymore. I think the part that bothered me was I just realized no one had really given me any idea of what to expect after the egg retrieval process was done. And maybe they do that on purpose so that you're just not worried about the steps that are too far ahead because it might be intimidating, but I just don't feel like I am getting from my clinic like this full picture of what the next steps are going to look like unless I really press them on it. And it's bothering me. I had that happen with the injection procedure during my first round, and I just wasn't expecting to kind of experience that all over again in my second round, but I feel like I did. It's just this time it was about the transfer process instead of the retrieval process. So another difference between my first and my second round were how my meds changed throughout the process. So for both rounds of IVF, I started with Gonal-F and Menopur, and then I added Insetratide, and then you eventually get into like trigger shot stuff. But anyway, so my Menopur dose changed throughout the process during my first round, but my Gonal-F never did. I think I just assumed that like your Gonal-F always stays the same. That's not the case. So with the second round, instead of doubling my Menopur the way it did the first time, they actually tripled it. And then also my Gonal-F went up. So my body was reacting differently the second time than the first time with the meds, which is understandable. They're going to tweak the medications throughout the process to make sure that they're working exactly the way your body needs them to for that particular round of IVF. So when they cranked those doses up, my initial reaction was like, okay, no problem. I'm really low on medication. I have like enough for one more dose of everything. But my pharmacy overnight stuff, so no problem. I got it in before the order deadline and it was fine. The problem was I realized around 6 p.m. when I typically get the shipping notification, I did not get a shipping notification. And I actually had a monitoring appointment the next morning. And so I ended up asking the nurses, like, do you guys have any extra medication on hand? Because I'm not convinced I'm going to have what I need to do my injections, like literally today. And they were able to scrounge up one of the medications from just like leftovers that someone else had. And then they sent a prescription over to a local pharmacy that they knew had it that I could pick up if I was really in a bind. Now, it ended up working out. They just forgot to send me the shipping notification, but my meds were on the way, so it worked out. But it was very stressful because, you're halfway through your cycle and you've been doing all of the injections. There is still a big financial commitment, but I was very grateful that they were able to provide me the extra medications to carry me through just in case it went wrong. And actually after my second round was over and I had some leftover medication, I gave it to the clinic so that if someone was in the same situation as me, they would have those meds to pull from. or potentially they could give it to someone who was lower income, who wasn't lucky enough to have insurance like me. The last mishap for me was the one that I feel easily the worst about and am still kind of like shocked about to this point. So at my clinic, when you're getting close to egg retrieval day, you're supposed to pick up a collection cup because when you do your egg retrieval, they want to fertilize the eggs as soon as possible after. And so they tell your significant other, assuming that they're male obviously, to go ahead and bring their like sperm sample that morning. The way that my clinic usually does it is they just have like some bags at the front desk with the specimen cups in them. And so you just grab one on your way out, which is fine, but no one reminds you to take them. And also if they happen to be out, you just don't even see them. And it's out of sight, out of mind. And so the day that I went in for my last appointment before my retrieval, I'm pretty sure they had no cups out, and I just didn't even think about it and didn't ask. I don't know if you could see that on the mirror. So I realized at like 10 p.m. the night before my retrieval, I don't have the specimen cup for this. And we looked around online. There was nowhere that was open that sold them. Like, I forget if it was closed or if they didn't have it, but we looked at like CVS, Walgreens, Walmart, like anywhere that was like 24 hours. I was like, can I get it overnight on an Amazon? Nothing. No one had it. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to try to go early in the morning to see if I can get a specimen cup like long before my arrival time. I want to say my arrival time was supposed to be like 9 a.m. So I went over there around like 7 or maybe it was 6:30. They weren't open, so I couldn't get one. And I was like, okay, well, I can't just wait around here all morning. I'll just come back for the retrieval with no specimen cup. You know, we checked in, talked to the receptionist, and the receptionist's reaction when I told her that, like, hey, I forgot to grab it, like, I'm really sorry, like, I don't know what to do, I don't know if it's a problem. She was like,
Are you serious? Like, how could you forget to do that? Like, I don't even know if we can do the retrieval today.
and I was like, oh my God. And I start crying. And then she's like,
Oh, no, honey. Like, you gotta calm down. Like, you can't be crying up in here.
and she's like telling me all this stuff, and it's just making me feel worse and worse and worse. And all I wanted to know was like, can I get one now? And like, and then we can deal with all of this later. But at this point, I'm like bawling in the lobby. But I was just sitting there thinking like, I just screwed up this $28,000 process that yes was covered by insurance, but like if we have to end up doing it again because I screwed it up, then like I'm out of pocket that much money. Like, what am I gonna do? And finally, the nurse that is actually supposed to take me back comes out and is like,
Let's like duck into an office.
and she asks me what's going on, and I tell her, and she was like,
Honey, that happens all the time. Don't worry about it. We'll grab something for him, and like we can't finish this without him. So like, don't worry about it. Like, whenever we get his stuff, we'll use it.
and it was like it was no big deal when you just actually talked to a nurse, but the receptionist who didn't know everything put so much doubt and stress in my head before, you know, you're being like put under for anesthesia and all this stuff. It was just so unnecessary and just left such a sour taste in my mouth. But I will say that nurse is just an absolute gem. I had her again for like a different procedure after that, and she was just a huge blessing. Like, she brought me so much peace, especially after that whole experience. So there was like good and bad with my clinic in that, but I think just the inconsistency with information and reminders, and just like people kind of knowing what was supposed to happen, even with like the receptionist, like it created a lot of avoidable stress that I still am shocked that I ended up having to go through. I think what bothered me the most about that whole situation with the receptionist is like, I am someone that should be the least stressed out in that situation. Like, I am spending less money than the average person. I do not have fertility issues. Like, this is not going to make or break me having a kid because I already have one beautiful kid, right? And I was bawling in that lobby because I knew that I screwed something up. And what I needed in that moment was compassion, not shaming. And I think someone who is in a much more fragile state, I feel like I would have been shattered completely. These larger clinics, there are wonderful people that seem to get this, and there are others that just don't seem to understand that We're not doing this every day. It is not our job. It's not our job to know every single detail. In the end though, the results were good. Not quite as good as the first time, but still positive. So on egg retrieval day, we got 16 eggs, all of which were mature, which is awesome. 15 of those fertilized, only 6 of them made it to the blastocyst phase, which when I heard that really stressed me out because again, I had half of them make it to blastocyst the first time. And so this was a big drop. Of those 6 though, we ended up with 2 usable embryos, a boy and a girl. And selfishly, because I love being a girl mom, I am so excited about that 1 girl embryo. So overall, 5 usable embryos for my 2 rounds of IVF, 4 boy embryos, 1 girl. If you're curious about any other parts of our IVF journey, I'm gonna have our playlist linked here for you to go to next. Kittens. I think the cats are saying that it's time to be done filming. I don't think it's capturing your paw, buddy, but oh, it's the mic. You like the mic. This is Hobbs. The other one earlier was Calvin. Usually I film midday and they're like napping, and now they're like, "Ew, we're alive. It's nighttime." Jesus. Okay. Do you see this? These in the blinds. I don't know. You can see that on the mirror.